Okay, hello, good afternoon, all. I hope you can all hear me. Rabbi Kelman couldn't make it this time, but we are going to get started now. This is the fourth class in my series on Jewish music. This was going to be the last class, but I got so excited about the topic, and it seemed like other people were excited too, that we're going to do one more class at the same time next week, where we're going to talk about shul tunes. Also, the final and fifth class will be good because there is a strong chance I'm not going to finish my material today, so we'll be able to carry over some of that next week as well. But we will see. So in this class, I want to talk about the explosion of Jewish music over the last 50 years. And we're not talking anymore about chazanas, and we're not talking any more specifically about shul music, but we're talking about Jewish pop music. And I think we will see some really interesting ways in which Jewish music has continued to be influenced by all sorts of trends from outside Judaism, which is kind of the theme we've been exploring all the way through. I'm also just excited about this class because I don't know. This is a topic I think that deserves some more exploration and some more people thinking and writing about. And really, I haven't seen a whole lot on this question of what Jewish pop music is all about, especially the frum sort of pop music. And hopefully, we'll talk about Israeli music as well, which is a whole different story. But that's the part I'm not sure if we're going to get to this week or if we're going to get to next week. But we'll see. So let's start with a brief history of how this frum pop music developed and how it sort of came to be. So people often trace it back to a couple different figures who's in the early 20th century. One of them being Yankel Talmud, who was a Gerer Chassid. Now, Talmud had no musical training. He could not even read music, but he composed over 1,500 nigunim for the Ger Hasidus, both in Europe and then in Israel. For example, one tune of his that you're probably almost certainly familiar with, we sing many weeks in Shul for the Chadodi, when you get to Lo Sevoshi. Lo Sevoshi Velo Sikomi. That's his. That's Yankel Talmud. Now, Yankel Talmud himself was not exactly a poppy singer, but what the thing about Yankel Talmud was he had a promoter, and that was David Werdiger. Who was another chassid. So Werdiger, and perhaps some of you have heard the story. I feel like Rabbi Sachs has told the story. Other people have told the story also about him, that he was a Holocaust survivor, and in fact, he was taken by the Nazis, and he was supposed to be shot by firing squad. He was lined up, but then the Nazi commander heard that he could sing. He said, "Can you sing something for us?" And he sang Kel Malei Rachmim, the Jewish prayer for the dead. And the Nazi was so moved by Werdiger that he spared him. And then he was actually able later to escape and get out and get to America. And in America, what Werdiger did is he took Yankel Talmud's Nigunim and the Nigunim of many other Hasidic groups, and he recorded them on records and popularizing them and spreading them. So this is like, there already was cantorial music, for example, being shared a lot on records, and well, originally the gramophone and then on records, but with Werdiger, you really start to get Hasidic Nigunim, which have a different sound to them, a more popular kind of sound to them in many ways, and those get recorded and spread. So another important figure here to mention in this context is Ben Sion Schenker. Also 20th century America, he was very close to the Majitzer Rebbe. And Schenker's songs in particular are very singable, and perhaps we've already mentioned this, but for example, he's the one who wrote the Eshes Chayil that we sing. Most people sing every Friday night, like Eshes Chayil Mi'imsa, that's from Ben Sion Schenker. And also he wrote Mizmor LeDavid, which you probably heard as well. So those are both Ben Sion Schenker. He actually also wrote, I learned recently, the one who's often sung at weddings. Yasi Salah Yechelo Kayikim Sos Chasana Kala. So that's also Ben Sion Sheker. He just wrote a really popular nigunim that are still sung to this day. One other Hasidic composer I just want to mention, not because he's as well known, but I think he's really cool, is Yom Tov Erlich, who actually wrote a lot of Yiddish music. You can find some of it on YouTube. He was a Karlin Stolen Chassid in Williamsburg. He has some really, really, really interesting stuff out there. I don't know. My Yiddish is not very good, but I enjoy listening to his stuff anyway. It's very jaunty, kind of very upbeat, sort of a new kind of sound to it. So in the 1950s, Shlomo Carlebach, he starts singing at concerts and becomes more and more popular as the decades go on. He was from a German rabbinical family originally. He studied in Mezer Yeshivos, and in fact, he was one of the first shluchim, actually, of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, sent down to do kiruv work. But he went off in his own direction. He didn't stay Lubavitch. And he brought people to Judaism, though, and inspired many people. And his tunes are very easy to sing, and it made tremendous inroads in the shul. And in fact, you can't really go to shul almost on any week now in an American synagogue and or maybe even Israeli and not hear some of Carlebach's tunes being sung. There's been a lot of controversy about Carlebach. Over the years, there are credible allegations against him of sexual improprieties, sexual assault during his lifetime that I don't like to go without mentioning them. But I still think that like his music, if we can divorce it from that, is still very popular and very important in the development of Jewish music. Another group important early group was the Rabbi's Sons, led by Rabbi Baruch Chait. He's still alive. Started in 1967, recorded until 1974. Chait went to Yeshivas Chavetz Chaim, which is actually a yeshiva that my brother learned at for many years. And the story goes that the Rosh Yeshiva in Chavetz Chaim, Rav Henoch Leibowitz, told Rabbi Chait to compose music to counteract the Beatles, sort of Jewish pop music essentially. And the group's big break was at a concert in Central Park in 1967, celebrating the victory in the Six-Day War. Some of their popular songs include Mi Ha'ish, Rabos Machshavos. I don't know if these things are sung so much anymore, but they were really, really popular at one time. Like Rabos Machshavos goes like Rabos Machshavos Belevish Vatzas Hashem Hiyasakum. So that's from the Rabbi's Sons. In general, I would say that one of the things that really got a lot of this Jewish pop music going also was actually the movement to free Soviet Jewry. There were concerts, a lot of concerts that went around that in the United States, in New York, and other places. And like I think singing all those songs, like Carlebach, for example, composed like Am Yisrael Chai, one of his most popular songs for the Soviet freeing the Soviet Jewry movement. In 1971, another interesting album, an album called Or Chadash, written by this other important Jewish from composer Rabbi Shmuel Brazil, who's still writing today, a huge force in Jewish popular music. Of the 11 tracks on this album, I learned recently, 4 of them are sung all the time to this day. One of them is Bilvavi Mishkan Evna, which maybe you've heard, like Bilvavi Mishkan Evna. Then you have Eitz Chaim Hi, not the one we sing when putting away the Torah, but sometimes the one we sing when we're tying up the Torah. Eitz Chaim Hi la'machazikim bo v'somcha me'usha. There's that one. There's another one called Shmelka's Nigun, which was apparently the wedding song of the 70s. And it goes, what does that one go again? Very, very, very popular. Of course, I'm forgetting in the moment. But I'll remember it later. Anyway, okay. I also must mention here A.B. Rottenberg, who's actually really my personal favorite contemporary Jewish composer. His Devekis album, starting in 1973, also became kind of the soundtrack of the synagogue. There's so many famous songs on those albums, like Leiv Tahor Beroli Elokim, or Nar Ha'isi Gam Zakanti, and so many more are from A.B. Rottenberg. His Journeys albums, in English, really redefined the from music in English, at least. And he was also very influenced by Carlebach himself. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of early Jewish pop music, and it certainly isn't free of non-Jewish influence either. I would say, though, the influence to me, I actually don't listen to like so much like sort of secular music, honestly, like in the rock pop genre. I'm not always so familiar with it, but I would say that, like, to me, this music sounds a lot more like folk music, maybe like Pete Seeger or Peter, Paul and Mary, Bob Dylan, maybe, or something like that, but not like the real rock and roll, like later or contemporary or later, like not like the 50s and 60s, 70s rock and roll people as much. But we start to get a new sound in Jewish music, I would say, in the 1970s. Yossi Piamenta, for example, is credited with introducing the electric guitar to Jewish music. And then, remember we just talked about David Werdiger, so his son, Mordechai Werdiger, goes by the name Mordechai ben David, who you've probably heard of, and Mordechai ben David sort of revolutionized Jewish music in 1974 with his first album, Hineni, and he sings Hebrew and English songs, but with an unmistakable rock and roll influence. You also have Avram Fried in 1981. He also had a lot. He sings a lot of Hasidic nigunim, Israeli songs, but a lot of his music chazanas. But he also has an unmistakable pop sound to many of his songs as well. And most of the popular music today still continues more or less in this trend with drums, electronic keyboards, guitars, and it sounds much more like pop or even disco music. And the non-Jewish influences are really unmistakable, I think, and ubiquitous in this music. And we'll talk more about some of these trends later. But just for now, you also start to see now more direct borrowing from non-Jewish songs. So, for example, you have Lenny Solomon's Schlock Rock, which did Jewish parodies of a lot of non-Jewish rock tunes. And the borrowing here was obvious and explicit. But not all borrowing was as obvious or explicit, but it was still going on. And I think the most famous early one here, or infamous maybe, is a song on an album called Not For Sale from 1986 from Mordechai Ben David, where he has a song, maybe you've heard, it goes, it's a Yiddish song actually, it goes, Yidden, Yidden, kum daheim, ya da 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 da. So that's a saying, Jews come home. However, this was the tune is not at all an original Mordechai Ben David tune, but in fact it actually comes from 1979 from a song that was performed at the international competition Eurovision by a band named Genghis Khan. The song was also called Genghis Khan and is actually about the military and sexual prowess of the Mongol conqueror himself. But Mordechai Ben David instead transformed it into a song about the coming of Mashiach. Since I can't resist just playing for you a tiny bit of the original, not very much, we'll stop it after a few seconds, but so you can get a sense of what Mordechai Ben David was working off of and how it maybe is very not Jewish in many different ways. Okay, so here we go. All right, so it's identical though to the Mordechai Ben David song. So he took that. Where did he get that from? How did he even know about Eurovision? Well, I think that one was in was in Jerusalem. I think so. He maybe he heard about it, and he found the song. But in any event, that's one example of an explicit borrowing from a non-Jewish song that was going on. We'll talk more about this as we go. Let's see. Oh, I didn't share the source sheet in the chat. Does everyone have access to the source sheet? I'm gonna share the source sheet in the chat, and then I'm also gonna share the source sheet on the screen. Hold on one second. Okay, so I've shared the source sheet. Now I'm going to share the source sheet with all of you so we can talk about some sources. Okay, here we go. All right, now you got the source sheet. Okay, so I put some pictures over here so you can see the brief history of Orthodox pop that I talked about. Yankel Talmud and Cantor David Werdiger, Shlomo Carlebach, the Rabbi's Sons, Devekis, Yossi Piamenta, and then Mordechai Ben David with his album Not For Sale, and indeed Genghis Khan. All right, so let's talk about let's transition to part two over here. And with this sort of growth of Jewish pop music, one issue that we need to deal with, one issue that we need to consider. Let's see. Can everyone see the source sheet okay? I can't see my controls anymore for some reason. They disappeared.
Yeah, we see it.
Okay, great. Okay. So one thing about Jewish pop music which is interesting is that Jewish music now is not liturgical. It's not only for shul, right? And it's not only for the Shabbos table, but these are like other songs made out of psukim, made out of Jewish texts. And the halachic question first we have to raise is like, can you even make music out of psukim just to sing that are not for the Shabbos table or not for shul? One would think so. One would see what could the problem possibly be. But if you look at the Gemara in Sanhedrin, it's not at all so clear. If you look in source number 1 over here, Tana Rabbanan, we have a brisa, Korei pasuk shel shir hashirim, voso oso kamin zemer. Let's say you read a pasuk of the Song of Songs and you make it like its own kind of song, Korei pasuk of Beis Mishtos below Zmano, or you read a pasuk in the tavern or in a banquet house not in its proper time, Maybe Ra Olam, it brings bad to the world. The Torah is like wearing sackcloth and standing before Hashem, as if it's standing before Hashem, and saying, Ribono Shalom, Master of Lura, you have rendered me a harp, like a harp on which clowns play. So there's a lot of things going on in this Gemara, but it seems to be that the Gemara is saying is that there's actually some problem of making Torah verses into songs. Although maybe we're going to see how it can be limited. And also, I would say, first of all, that maybe this is, some I think would say this is just an agadic statement. It doesn't have halachic force because the Shulchan Aruch, for example, does not quote it lahalacha, but there were several other commentaries that do. If you look in source number 2 in the Mishnah Berurah, he brings the Maharil from the 14th century we've talked about, who does quote this halacha, and he says, "Kaseh b'likutei Maharil." The Maharil writes, "Shaloka dinhu shemashor v'mishta odacha kianisan v'chi hagavna." He says it's not proper those that sing the pasuk of odacha kianisani or other pasukim, the simchas mereos, which just like a random kind of happiness, not any kind of mitzvah. Because then the Gemara in Sanhedrin applies. But in shul, of course, you can sing. And the Magen Avram also concludes to lo shari b'Shabbos l'zamer ela osan shir sheniskanu ala suda. Magen Avram says you can only sing those zmiros that are basically in the bench, the ones that were written for the meal. But other kinds of poems are forbidden. So he does over here quote the Sahalacha that you shouldn't be making psukim into songs. But we do this all the time. So the question is why? So the Igros Moshe tries to grapple with this, or Moshe Feinstein grapples with this, and he says, I'll just read it in English over here. He says, in truth, we see that most people in the world sing the texts of blessings and even verses on all sorts of joyous occasions, even pious individuals and men of exemplary conduct, despite the fact that the Gemara says it's prohibited. And I don't know a proper explanation for this, but perhaps they interpret the Gemara as referring specifically to Shir HaShirim, so that people should not come to treat Shir HaShirim lightly and say that it's not sacred, merely secular love poetry. Because we did see the Gemara's example, at least, was from Shir HaShirim, so maybe you can limit it to that. But then he says, for people with refined spiritual sensitivity, this Bali Nefesh, and we've talked about this category before, that doesn't really seem to apply to us as a very high level. It is fitting to be stringent and not to make tape recordings of blessings and verses. And if such a recording has already been made, it should not be set to play the blessings and verses merely for enjoyment. So he says that, he on the one hand, Moshe Feinstein throws up his hands and said, well, people seem to be doing this, so how much of a problem could it be? On the other hand, he says, maybe you really shouldn't do it. But one answer might be that it only applies to Shir HaShirim. Another answer is suggested by Rashi over here, actually, on the verse. And Rashi over here is actually commenting on the second part of the Gemara. The part in the Gemara says that you shouldn't sing psukim not in their proper time at a tavern. And Rashi is interpreting that, but it's possible that you can apply what he says here to the earlier part of the Gemara too. And some people at least do make that suggestion. I saw an article from Rabbi Jachter who makes that suggestion. But Rashi over here says, B'meisav al yeno, if he's, with his wine, osa schikosa b'divrei Torah. He makes a joke out of the words of the Torah. V'kor psukim b'kol ram, l'sachik b'hem b'nei hamishta. And he's reading the psukim very loudly so people can make fun of them. Avalim omer b'zmano ala mishnah. But if he says them in their proper time, kagon shu yom tov, v'noto kos b'yadav omer lav divrei haggadah psukim yan shuyom, and he says something related to the day, maybe tov olam. That's good. So Rashi, at least on the second part of the Gemara, seems to be saying that this is limited. That really the problem is if you're just saying the psukim to make fun of them. If you're saying the psukim, though, to make a proper Torah song out of them, it shouldn't be a problem. And perhaps you can read this back into the first thing in the Gemara as well, and some people do that. But in any event, that is an interesting halachic issue that I wasn't aware of before researching this. That some people bring, but in the fact of the matter is that in the end of the day, and Rabbi Jachter says this too, he sort of throws up his hands at the end and says, people are doing this, and people don't really seem to think this is an issue, and in any event, it's probably better that people are listening to Jewish music than non-Jewish music, and the fact of the matter is this is just something that's done nowadays, and no one seems to have much of a problem with it. But the second issue, perhaps, with this growth of from pop music that we really have to explore seriously, is the style of the new music, and particularly that it's rock and roll music. Let's see. Yeah, particularly that it's rock and roll music. So it's some interesting comments that were made in the Jewish Observer. Maybe some of you remember the Jewish Observer. Hold on, I have to mute. Hold on.
Yes, if you can mute all of us,
Yeah. No, I just have to find
find
the
it
control.
yourself.
Yeah.
It's mute all for you.
Yeah.
You can do it.
Okay, I got it. Should be muted. All right. People can unmute still to ask questions. Well, I'm gonna address questions at the end. Okay, let me share the source sheet again. Hold on. Okay. So the Jewish Observer, maybe some of you remember, was an important organ for the yeshiva world in America, and they really always had thoughtful articles. So starting from the 70s already and going all the way through the end of its run in the 2000s, they occasionally will run articles about Jewish music, people complaining and decrying the state of Jewish music. So here's one I really like, source number 5 from 1975. Uh, and the author writes, Hasidic music entered a new era in 1959 with the release of Shlomo Carlebach's first record, Hanasham Alach. Nigunim became part of the world of media, and as much as any other cultural phenomenon adopted by the media, it was to change and be changed. The immediate positive result was the well-deserved proliferation of the music of Majlis and Chabad. We talked about Ben Sion Schenker, other people who were recording the music of Hasidim. It was not long, however, before the success of Hasidische records, together with the American pop-folk revival of the early 60s, gave birth to the plastic nigun. Peter, Paul, and Mary went to the mikvah and came out rabbi's sons. So to get that joke fully, you have to know there was a group called the Rabbi Sons that we talked about, and he's making fun of that. But what do you see over here? He's really having this problem with the fact that they're just basically taking the pop music of the day and transforming it into Jewish music, and he doesn't like it. So this is another one from the 90s. And the author writes over here in source number 6. He says, and flashy but spiritually banal rock tunes are disguising themselves in the Strymel and Bekeshev of ostensibly holy lyrics. You don't have to be a Hasidic Rebbe to know what violence, ego, and coarse sensualism sounds like. I think most of us know what this music is really about, if only we will admit it to ourselves. So here the author is saying, interestingly, that it's the sound of the music itself. There's something about the sound, there's something inherent in the sound of this rock music which is violent and sensual. And we're going to evaluate this a little bit later, but this is what he says here. He says that's the problem with it. But my favorite of all, I think, is source number 7, a letter to the editor responding to that previous article in source number 6. Where the letter writer says, we now avoid Gentile foods, movies, and books while accepting its crassest, synthesized music. Almost 10 years ago, a prestigious Orthodox Shabbaton in Palm Springs offered Judaicized rock music as Motzei Shabbos entertainment. The band leader sat slumped with a jaded expression implying, I've seen it all, and it's a bore. His yarmulke was big, though. A 1995 Orthodox telethon in L.A. showed a rocking chassid shoving a microphone down his throat. Several chubby men in yeshiva garb nearby had sweat rolling down their payas, their hands and hips gyrating in all too perfect synchronization. Skip a little, and then it's worth considering that we may be more safely exposed to 18th and 19th century symphonic music than to schlock rock. So he says, better to have the non-Jewish music of the 18th and 19th century than the Jewish music of the 20th century. So kind of funny, kind of humorous, but the problem he's raising again is there's something about this music that just doesn't sound Jewish. There's something that just doesn't there's something about it, but we're going to put our finger on what this might mean in a second, but like, something about it doesn't sound Jewish. And the truth of the matter is that actually Chaim Soloveitchik, in his famous article Rupture and Reconstruction and Tradition in 1994, essentially made the same point. Now, keep in mind that Soloveitchik wasn't condemning anyone, he wasn't really taking an opinion, and this is true throughout that article, where he talks about how the mimetic tradition, the sort of the oral tradition from parent to child, has receded and been replaced with a book culture. That's what the article famously is about. But he does seem kind of be lamenting this shift. But part of the shift that he mentions is rock music, sung with kosher lyrics, was heard at the weddings of the most religious. There had been no kosher jazz or kosher swing, for music is evocative, and what was elicited by the contemporary beat was felt by the previous generation to be alien to a Jewish rejoicing, to a Yiddish simcha. This was no longer the case. The body syncopated to the beat of rock, and the emotional receptivities that the contemporary rhythm engendered were now felt to be consonant with the spirit of Jewish rejoicing. Indeed, Hasidic rock concerts, though decried, were not unheard of. So he's saying that he's not exactly criticizing, he's saying there's been a shift, that this type of music wasn't really Jewish music before. It was viewed as foreign to Jewish music, and now it's no longer viewed as foreign to Jewish music. So he's pointing out this shift. Okay. And you see this even more recently as well. So, like I found this from 2019, the Yeshiva World News has a ban that the Gedolim put out. You can see the Gedolim, you can see various rabbis from the Yeshiva World signing below about Jewish music at weddings. And some of the things they say is that they talk about it has been accepted to compromise the Kedusha with inappropriate music coming from non-Jewish sources. And tragically today, a Jewish wedding can sometimes appear to be no different from a disco party. And then you see what they say. So these are the takana essentially. This is what they want to impose upon Jewish weddings. No non-Jewish songs or intros should be used. Bass level should be kept at medium. No beats with loud electronic sound effects. No flashing, moving, or color-changing lights. So you kind of get the picture of what they're trying to say over here. Is this followed? Not really. I mean, the fact of the matter is the firm music has spread more and more and more, and people don't seem to be worried about these particular issues, despite what the rabbis are saying. Okay, so the most systematic critique that's coming out of the yeshiva world about this from pop music is probably from someone named Rabbi Ephraim Luft. Rabbi Ephraim Luft lives in Bnei Brak, and he's really, I believe, the driving force behind a lot of the periodic bands from the Gedolim, like the one we saw above. I mean, his issue is that he says the sound itself and the types of beats used in rock and disco music cause the body, in his opinion, to overpower the mind and arouse immoral thoughts in a person, and influences them in subtle ways. He says some of these beats even come from Avodah Zarah, and he says that if you look at rock music, as its popularity has increased, there's a decline in general morality in society, and he says that the dance moves in this music are often sexually suggestive as well. So he has his set of rules for what frum music can be, and his rules have a lot to do with the way the beat sounds and the types of beats that are allowed to be used. So I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but you can kind of look at this in the source sheet. Yeah, so he has a lot to say about this. Now, it's interesting, the most public success that the detractors of Jewish rock have had was actually shutting down a concert by the Hasidic singer Lipa Schmelzer called The Big Event in 2008. You can see over here in Hamodia, one of the front papers, this pashkavil, this flyer against the concert and talking about how the concert is inappropriate and should be shut down. Now, a lot of the complaint about this concert that you see in this ad in Hamodia is really about the fact that even though there was separate seating, both men and women were going to be at the concert, so they felt that was inappropriate. But no doubt that the style of music, which was heavily influenced by contemporary pop, had something to do with the Gedolim's writing against this concert. Now, did this ban work? Well, in this case, it actually did. Lipa Schmelzer did not do the concert. However, the next year, in 2009, he just did the concert. He just did the concert then instead. So not very long lasting again. So what's really interesting about this critique also that we're seeing coming out of segments of the firm world. And as I said, I want to emphasize, this is sort of almost a fringe critique. Most people in the firm world don't have a problem with this music. It's a small group of people. And it's not entirely itself. The critique itself is not entirely authentically Jewish. And what I mean by that is that, especially in the 50s, when this rock and roll music was first developing and becoming popular, you see a lot of similar critiques, both in the Christian community, but also even in the secular world. And for example, Christian preachers and activists called rock and roll the devil's music. They talked about the immoral nature of the beat, the sexual nature of it, the African tribal influence, and more. But it wasn't just Christians. Pablo Casals, a world-famous cellist, said that rock and roll was poison put to sound. Frank Sinatra, the singer, said rock and roll was the most brutal, ugly, degenerate, vicious form of expression it has been my misfortune to hear. It is sung, played, and written for the most part by cretinous goons, and by means of sly, lewd, dirty lyrics. It manages to be the martial music of every signbird delinquent on the face of the earth. Perhaps he was afraid that his own music was becoming less popular, but in any event, that's what he had to say about it. And just like the Gedolim tried to ban rock music, it was tried to be banned in certain places and events in the secular world as well. In 1956, I'll give a few examples. In 1956, the City Council of Santa Cruz announced a total ban on rock and roll at public gatherings, calling the music detrimental to both the health and morals of our youth and community. In San Antonio, Texas, rock music was prohibited from jukeboxes at municipal swimming pools. Time magazine reported in San Antonio, rock and roll was banned from city swimming pools, jukeboxes, because, said the City Council, its primitive beat attracted undesirable elements given to practicing their spastic gyrations in abbreviated bathing suits. In 1956, 1957, Elvis Presley appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. But at one of his appearances there, he was only shown from the waist up. Why? Because of his gyrating pelvis. He was even called Elvis the pelvis. So hopefully that gives you an idea of sort of what was going on outside the Jewish world to criticize this music as well. Now, I'll say a few things about this. I mean, one is that these criticisms kind of mostly vanished over time. I'm not saying there's no one outside the Jewish world who maintains this, but the fact of the matter is rock and roll is very popular, rock and roll is shown on TV, and you can argue for sure about aspects of it that are degenerate and aspects of it that are inappropriate, but the fact of the matter is that you don't see a lot of criticism anymore in general society. Also, I think it's hard to separate and disentangle some of these criticisms from things that are rather unsavory. And by that, I mean that you can even hear in some of the quotes I gave that there seems to be a concern here, partially about rock music being the music of black people, and a racial component to this and a racism component to this, and sort of concerns raised about the integration of blacks and whites often went along with these concerns, and it's really hard to disentangle these two things, and that I think is a reason that we should view these criticisms with a great deal of suspicion in the modern day. And I think we also have to wonder is how much of this is like also we don't like what the young people are doing, and nowadays, it's kind of been shown that it hasn't really been that much of a problem. I think it's a really like complicated issue to unpack, and I don't really want to take a position per se on is rock music appropriate, is it not appropriate from a Jewish perspective, especially non-Jewish music I'm talking about here. I think there's what to say about contemporary pop music. Some people will say it's fine and it's not doing anything bad, and some people will say no, this is really terrible and we shouldn't be listening to this at all. But I think at least when it comes to the Jewish pop music, despite some of the sources we saw before, I think there's a broad consensus among people that this music can be koshered, just like other types of music that's been koshered across the generations. That despite maybe its roots and despite maybe some things about the sound and the beat, if the music brings one closer to Hashem, and I think it's hard to argue that for many people this music does not bring them closer to Hashem. I think for many people it really does. And that being the case, I don't know that we should really view this any differently than the borrowing of non-Jewish music from other sources. But it is still interesting to sort of see these criticisms and to see the way that they've kind of rear their heads from time to time, and people have this frustration with some of the way that the Jewish music is sounding and how much it borrows from non-Jewish music. But nevertheless, this borrowing does continue. And again, in most mainstream circles, this does not really, people don't really seem to have much of a problem with this. And I think the criticism from pop music has really always been at the margins. And I think if anything, the Jewish music has pushed more and more boundaries over the years, and I'd like to explore that in the second part of this class to give you some examples of the way the Jewish music is continuing to change and continuing to adapt and adopt all sorts of interesting things from outside of Judaism in interesting ways. And again, I'm not here to either criticize or say it's great, but more just to document this as a historian to show kind of how this is happening and the ways I think it's particularly interesting and different. So let me stop the share of the source sheet for a moment. What I want to try to do is I do want to try to address some of the comments in the chat because there's a lot of them, and then I'll move on to the second part. Okay, so let's see. Okay, and Ariel Siegel points us to an interesting new record of the Library of Congress where he works for a new firm rock musician. Okay, very interesting. He also says his cousins in Washington Heights are very surprised to learn about the Genghis Khan connection to the Mordechai ben David. Yes, me too. Zena says, if the Talmud says that, it means that not a few people were doing it. Yeah, so they were singing music, presumably Pesukim to songs. Yeah. Yeah, Ruth says rock and roll of yesteryear is Beethoven compared to rap of today. Yes, it's really, really changed a lot, and we're going to see actually the way that the Jewish music, the from music, has continued to adopt even some of the newer trends, which we'll talk about. Sura says the Piamentas definitely played kosher jazz, especially the flute-centric pieces. Flute-centric pieces, sure. That's it. Okay, I'm not sure. Okay. Ephraim Loft's book is available to view for download. Thank you, Shmuel. Yeah, Susanna says there was no Jewish swing because the Jews were not integrated into general society at the time. Yeah, I mean, I think there has been more integration over time, and I think that has something to do with this. No mixed dancing. I think Frank Sinatra got that quote from my father. Oh, really interesting. Okay, I want to hear more about that. Tell me more about that.
I'm just joking.
Okay.
But that's what my father
Oh, I
said that
understand what you're saying
all
now.
the time.
Yeah,
When
yeah,
I
yeah.
played the Beatles, he would put, he crank up the volume on his Sinatra.
Yeah, yeah. Sarah says Ed Sullivan only show Elvis's face. Well, actually, I watched the video. You can actually see a little bit further down, but like he kind of cuts off like mid chest, which is really interesting. The critics are okay, fine, all right. Shmuel says rock music cannot be kosher. Shmuel has a whole site where he talks about why he believes that. Um, okay, so you can look at his resources if you're interested in that position. Um, is it the music itself or the universal nature of most music tearing down walls, possibly integrating people to society in general? I'm not exactly sure what that comment is going at, but I mean,
It's
I
just saying, is it the music, or this is another thing that our people can do with non-Jews or other types of Jews, and we don't want them mixing into society as a whole.
Right. So that's really interesting though, because like I think what's happening is that like these from pop musicians are not mixing into society as a whole. They're making their own sort of Jewish version of this. And there's a lot of people who only listen to that. Like they won't listen to non-Jewish music. They'll only listen to that stuff. So I don't know that the integration issue is really the concern.
But everybody has cousins who will show them the originals, and once you hear the original,
Right, right. Okay. Yeah, yeah, I hear that. I mean, I think there's something to that. Um,
I wonder,
okay.
some of the Rebbeim might actually prefer classical non-Jewish music to some of this.
Right, I think that's right. I think that's what kind of that letter writer at least was saying in the
Right.
Jewish Observer. That maybe that sounds more refined. That there's something much more refined
Hmm.
about that than the beats and the syncopation of the modern pop music.
Oh yes, several Rebbeim appreciate the best of classical music.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, this is an interesting conversation. We're going to continue it at the end of the class as well. But what I want to do now is share with you some more examples of how Jewish music is getting even more sort of integrated with secular music. This part in particular, just some of these things I just find kind of wild. Hopefully, you'll find them as interesting as I do. Okay, first let's see, let's share. Okay, so let's see, what should we share first? Okay, let's actually share some more music first. Um, Okay, we'll close this one. We're moving on to the next one. This is the Maccabees' new song. So the Maccabees we talked about a little bit last time. This is their K-pop Demon Hunters Hanukkah Medley. Now, K-pop Demon Hunter is an extremely popular Netflix movie. All the kids are singing it. My son likes the songs. Really hard songs to sing. But and not necessarily bad music. Just not Jewish music. But the Maccabees did a cover of it. The Maccabees in general are doing a lot of covers of pop songs. Like we saw before Mordechai Ben David doing a cover of the Genghis Khan song, but over there was kind of an unacknowledged cover. He didn't say where he was taking it from. No one, his listeners presumably didn't know where he was getting it from. But the Maccabees are very explicit about where they're getting their music from. It's really just parodies and covers of this non-Jewish music, and this is really accepted nowadays. This is kind of different than what it was before. You really see this stuff is much more accepted than it was. I mean, you can go to a Hanukkah party, you'll hear the Maccabees, you'll hear other groups that are just, explicitly taking covers of non-Jewish songs and doing it. And what I think was particularly interesting about this one is they didn't even really change the words. I'll just play you just a few bits of it, and then I'll show you the source sheet just to see what I mean.
We're shattering the silence, we're rising, defiant, shouting in the quiet. You're not alone. We listen to the demons, we let them get between us. But none of us are out here on our own. Cause we're still builders, cause we're still strivers, cause we have heroes, we have survivors, the dreamers, the fighters. We're broken, we're tired, but we'll keep the fire, and I'll be right here by your side. We broke into a million pieces and we can't go back.
And I'll show you on the source sheet how they didn't really even change. They barely changed the lyrics even to the song. If we look over here down on source number 12 over here, so the original, you can see you can see the original and you can see the Maccabees version, and like they changed a few of the words to make it more Jewish, like that Hanukkah relay, my voice lights up the night, instead of into my voice without the lies. But other than that, it's just the same song. I think they feel it's a good message, so why not? Again, there's no like trying to hide the fact that it's a cover of a pop song anymore. It just is what it is, and that's considered much more acceptable right now to give it some Jewish content. We were talking a little bit about rap music and how that's and how like there's all these new sounds. Well, these are actually being incorporated. Also, I want to play you another interesting. A little bit of another interesting song. This one's also kind of shocking. This is a Jewish song, a Hasidic song actually, about shidduchim, about this Gemara that talks about how at 40 days before a child is even conceived, there's a shidduch that's made for them. The bas kol that has like the voice of like almost like a heavenly voice comes out and says that these two people are designated for each other. So they made like a rap song out of this. I'll play you a little bit of it.
Arbu im yoim koidim yitzias avlat bas kol yoitzais v'yomeres bas ploini leploini. Ich hör den bas kol, wo sucht den bas kol, yo den bas kol, jeden den bas kol. Ich hör den bas kol, wo sucht den bas kol, yo den bas kol, jeden den bas kol.
Now you can see. Now I'll show you where this came from. I'm not showing you the actual video of this one because it's kind of inappropriate. But you can hear the song. Just show you a few seconds. You can hear where this came from. This is from a group called Fifth Harmony. The song is called Lyric. It's called Worth It. Not exactly the most appropriate song. And I'll play you just a few seconds of it so you can see where this came from.
Give it to me, I'm worth it.
All right, I think we've heard enough of that. All right. but in any event, you see how they just completely took that song, this rap song, not at all an appropriate song by any means, and they turned it into a Jewish song. So that's also kind of surprising and new. Then we talked a little bit about Lipa Schmelzer. Lipa Schmelzer was the one who got his concert canceled. Now his music is also really very, very interesting and very different than what was going on in the Jewish world before. He's even been called by some articles the Jewish Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga is kind of famous for her sort of elaborate, very weird music videos, very weird songs. Let me just give you a little flavor of Lipa Schmelzer for a second. You can see why indeed it is indeed quite different. Okay, let's see. Here we go.
The family gets dizzy, the father seems so busy. My phone is going crazy, my hands are numb and frizzy. The gadgets make us lazy, we gotta take it easy. Oh, can you hang up the phone? I didn't see you in ages, it seems to me contagious. You're going through some stages, the phone makes you outrageous. It locks you up in.
All right, so that's Lipa Schmelzer. So what I find so interesting about that video in many ways, it's like this elaborate music video, dressed up as a robot, doing this robotic dance. There's all sorts of weird stuff going on. And at the same time, what's the message he's trying to send? The message he's trying to send is technology is bad. We're addicted to our phones, and that's bad. So he's using sort of this creative new musical medium to do that. Okay, here's another one. Oh, here's another one. This is a song. I think we talked about this in the comment period last time. I'm not sure if everyone was there. It's an Israeli song. It's called Adama Vishamayim. And I'll play for you just a tiny bit of this one as well, and then we'll talk about it for a moment. Let's see.
Adama Vishamayim Chomayish צליל המים אני מרגיש זאת בגופי ברוחי ונשמתי היה 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 היה
All right, I'm gonna stop this for a second. I actually want to let me share the source sheet because I think I have a couple things on there about this one. Okay, well, here's the Maccabees song. If we go down, there's Bas Kol we talked about, the Yiddish song about the... And also I just want to say about the Bas Kol song I didn't mention before, but like you can hear, like I think why they adapted that song. You kind of hear that klezmer intro even in the original non-Jewish song. So here's an article from Matzav about Adama V'Shamayim. And it talks about, you've probably heard about Adam of Shamayim, but people don't know the song origin. The original song, it says over here, is Strong Wind, Deep Water. It is a song by an earth-worshipping pagan cult translated into Hebrew almost word for word for the Segol group. It says, I would strongly urge you to consider whether or not you should play this song in the future. We wouldn't sing about Gilead Aras or Shvichas Damim or Helig Simchas like adultery or bloodshed. Singing a song of Avodah Zarah should be no exception. Baruch Hashem, we have many great Levitic songs to choose from without an Avodah Zarah chant. And he talks over here about how he thinks why it's an Avodah Zarah chant. And he goes on about this. So it's interesting. You have this song, which is actually apparently a Wiccan chant about worshiping an earth goddess, but it's played at weddings. There's actually a short share on Why You Torah from by Aryeh Leibowitz, and he says this one for sure is a problem with Chukas HaGoyim. Even if most songs are not, this is the ways of the Gentiles. You shouldn't listen to it. He says that the words are referencing pagan concepts. Nevertheless, the song is accepted. People play it at weddings. I do think, though, that there is actually some uncertainty about the origin of the song. What I've seen is that some people say the Hebrew version was first, and then was adapted by the Wiccans, and maybe it's a old Native American chant, and not a Wiccan chant originally. Possibly you could say the origins have been sufficiently obfuscated, that maybe that makes it somewhat less problematic. I don't know. But anyways, it's kind of interesting, again, how sort of a lot of things are making their way into Jewish music from all sorts of unusual and interesting sources. Probably some of you have heard of the Hasidic artist Shulam Lemmer. Shulam Lemmer is a Hasidic singer. A lot of really, really beautiful music, has this beautiful high tenor voice. But Shulam Lemmer is interesting in that he actually also has an album that he signed with a non-Jewish music record label, Decca Gold, part of Universal Music. And he put out an album with Jewish and secular songs. So here he is in full beard and payas, and he's singing Billy Joel. I'll give you an example of this as well.
10 o'clock on a Saturday, the regular crowd shuffles in. There's an old man sitting next to me, making love to his tonic and gin.
So also something new, something different. This wasn't really happening before, that you would have a Hasidic singer doing something like this, but there he is. I mean, he's a frum guy, and he goes to shuls, and he goes to Jewish concerts, he does all sorts of things, but he's also singing the national anthem at stadiums, and he's also singing The Piano Man by Billy Joel. Another thing that's really interesting that's happening now with Jewish music is the way that you have the music is almost bringing together different groups of Jews, like from all across the spectrum and all across denominations. Like you can see sometimes you'll have videos with modern Orthodox or Dati Leumi singers singing with Hasidic singers and stuff like that. And I think one of the most remarkable things is actually the tune for Havdalah by Devi Friedman, who's Reform, that she composed, that's being sung. That tune for Havdalah is being sung like all over the Jewish world. There's this great video that I'll just play you a little bit of it that shows you kind of how Devi Friedman's tune is being sung in all sorts of different contexts all over the world. Here. Hasidim.
Vorei pari hagafen la la la.
So the idea over here is that everyone is singing Devi Friedman, regardless of where they come from. So that's also another interesting feature about how music can unite people in this way. Then we already talked a little about rap, but you have now you have some real serious from rappers. Maybe you've heard of Nissim Black. I'll play you a little clip from Nissim Black. You can see how different this is.
Yeah, we gon' play it loud until they feel it, yo. Yeah, we gon' blow the roof up off the building, yo. Yeah, we gon' play that motherland bounce. Check it out now, motherland bounce. Check it out now, motherland bounce.
So again, something really different. That's Nissim Black. I mean, I believe he's a convert. But he brought sort of that rap sound to Jewish music, and you have him here in his full Hasidic garb. There he is rapping. And I think another thing that's interesting. I just have so many things here, and we're not going to get to all of them here. But let me do a few more, and then we'll stop for questions, and we'll continue a little bit next time. But this idea that like some of we talked about, originally a lot of this from pop music was songs they were taking psukim or Jewish texts and making them into songs. And I think something you see now is they're not even doing that anymore. What they're doing is just writing songs that have good messages, even if don't explicitly reference psukim or anything like that. So here's Mordechai Shapiro, one of the young popular Jewish singers, and here's what he has to say.
This vicious cycle I can't break. I wake up to the echo of the choices I've made, with the same old demons that keep calling my name. Every morning feels the same. I'm trying my best, and I hope you're proud. I'm rising up through the ups and downs. I'm trying my best, and God, I know that I'm not perfect. And my commitments from the past, how they never seem to last. I'm trying my best, and God, I know that I'm not perfect.
So that was Mordechai Shapiro, and there is nothing explicitly Jewish about that song. It's kind of like a song trying to it's like chizuk. It's trying to make people feel better about themselves. It's trying to help people help themselves and do better and stuff like that. And it's certainly nothing objectionable about it. It's certainly a very good message. But you can hear all sorts of songs in other genres outside the Jewish world too that are having the same messages now. So it's another interesting thing about the way that Jewish music is changing. I actually also think that song sounds a little bit country. I don't know what other people think, but that's what it sounds like to me a little bit. I think you have more people also just explicitly, more singers outside the Jewish world. You see this in Christian music, and now I think in Jewish music too, people singing explicitly about faith in ways that maybe you didn't hear in English too. This is actually one of my favorite new songs. I'll just play a little bit of it for you. It's very much a song about faith in Hashem.
I know you will protect me. I know you will watch over me. I know that I am never alone. I feel you right beside me. I feel you right here guiding me. I know that you will bring us home.
So again, beautiful song, beautiful message, but I think really, really different than anything that was going on 20 years ago in Jewish music to have an English song about faith like that. Okay, one more issue let's talk about, and then we're going to leave the rest for the next class, and that is the issue of Kol Isha, about women singing. So there's a couple changes here that I think that have really happened over the recent years. So one thing is this growth of the industry of frum women singing for other frum women. This is really a big thing. There's some really, really talented frum female singers out there who are making songs just for women to listen to alone, and those audiences. However, they're still posting their stuff on YouTube. They're still posting their stuff on Instagram. Nothing's keeping people out. They put sometimes a banner saying this is really for women only. But I guess it's up to the listener's discretion whether they want to do that, listen to that or not. But in any event, you do see that this is an industry. But also, I think beyond that, you also have frum women now singing for men, and this is also something new that really didn't exist before. And there really is some halachic changes going on in this arena as well. Let me share the source sheet again. You'll see what I mean. So let's see. If you go down over here to page 10, so you actually have a tshuva as an article in tradition from Moshe Lichtenstein, who's one of the Rosh Yeshiva at Har Etzion at Gush. And he goes through all the sources, and he says he doesn't really think that Kol Isha, that women singing in front of the men, doesn't exactly apply in the way that people in the previous generation says it applies. And I'll just read you the bolded part over here. He says, in terms of day-to-day life, this means we may permit women singing of Shabbos and Miros. This was something that was kind of permitted before by other posting like the Sridei Eish of Yaakov Weinberg already in Germany. But then he says also participation in official ceremonies of a serious and formal nature, listening to random radio commercials and the like. So he's definitely willing to open up a little bit on the roles of Kol Isha. Then you have Rabbi David Bigman, who's the Rosh Yeshiva at Ma'ale Gilboa, in source number 16. He would say he goes even a little further. And he says, it is permitted to be lenient with regard to listening to the voice of women singing when there is a clear sense that the listening is innocent and the singing is innocent. Such an assessment is dependent on 5 conditions: context and appropriate atmosphere, the lyrics of the song, the musical style, dress, body language. And he says, according to this approach, there is no problem with those among our daughters who are modest and upstanding to develop a career in singing. So look how far he's willing to go. As long as they're, singing appropriate uplifting songs that don't have inappropriate content or inappropriate singing styles or body motions or whatever, they can even develop a career in singing even within the general culture, as long as they do not make concessions of the refined foundations of Torah culture and do not cooperate with the vulgar commercialized aspects of the culture surrounding us. So it's interesting how far he's willing to go. And we have, for example, many groups nowadays that are doing this. I think a famous one, maybe you've heard, is Yonina, which I'll just play for you, like just a few seconds of Yonina. There's a husband and wife who have been singing together for a while.
מודה אני כל בוקר שהחזרת את נשמתי.
מודה אני על בגד שהנחת על גופי, שלא יהיה לי קר, אתה שומר עליי. מודה אני כל בוקר על האור.
And these people, they go, Yoni and Nina, that's their names. They go around and they perform concerts together and they sing together from audiences. I mean, obviously not everyone agrees with this approach of Rav Lichtenstein or of Bigman, but it is an approach now that's out there in the Orthodox world. That's changing the way women's voices in song is applied in Jewish life today in some circles. Again, not in all circles, but it's interesting that this is becoming more accepted in a way I think that it wasn't before. So I think we've just gone through like a whole bunch of really interesting changes in the way we talked about sort of the development of frum music from the beginning and this frum pop music from the 50s and on. And I think we've seen, particularly in the last 20 years, how the changes just keep accelerating. And there's so many different new styles that are being incorporated in so many interesting ways. And that's what I wanted to show you in this class. I'm very glad we're going to have another class, because what I want to talk about in the next class, we're going to start off actually talking about Israeli music, because I think there's a whole different issue that opens up about the way Israeli music has done such an interesting way. It blends religious and secular in a way that we just don't see in America. So we're going to start off next class talking about that, and then for the rest of the next class, we're going to then talk about some shul tunes, some popular shul tunes and where they came from, and then we'll also give some time, hopefully some more time for people to talk about tunes that they find interesting or other things they find interesting about music that we didn't get a chance to address. So for the last few minutes, let me address the comments in the chat, and then I'll open up the floor for comments as well. Okay, let's see. And after all, Hashem did not get angry with the people at Sinai until they got up to play rock and roll. Let's achek. Okay, sure. The longer the Jewish folk and rock music listen to, the more it becomes Jewish music, less evokes a spiritual spirit. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think you said that well, Rivka. I mean, I think that's kind of been my thrust throughout this class, is that Jewish music adapts what's out there, and the longer I think that it does adapt that, the more Jewish a sound it has. Many people who listen don't even know the original genre. Yeah. Okay. Baruch Sha'amar sung to the tune of Cat Stevens' Morning is Broken. Okay. Interesting. I don't know if I'm familiar with that. Who can listen to digital avatars, especially avatars that can be pictures of men singing with women? Copyright infringement. Well, I mean, I think parodies are generally allowed. Like, you're allowed to make a cover of a song that's a parody of the original. I mean, I guess the question is how close it is. But I think general covers and interpretations are generally allowed without copyright infringement in general. Susanna says, I think it's also
paid for the rights to it.
Huh?
They might have paid for the rights to it.
That too. They might also pay for the rights to do it. Yeah. Susanna says, I think it's a play on words also, boss, as opposed to bass, the low part. Yeah, I think that's also part of it. That's also part of this Boss Cole song. Sarah says, sounds Native American, the hey, hey, hey. Yeah, I think so. Esther says, in the increasingly insular word of yeshivas and charedi, how are they exposed to some of this very crude and secular music? Of course, nobody knows them, but to most of it. So that's the interesting thing. They're taking sort of genres that I think we can all agree that the non-Jewish versions of are rather crude and don't seem particularly, I guess, like, great Jewish-wise. I mean, I think we can probably agree on that, but they're still exposed to this. And I think it's interesting because, again, I think most of the people in the yeshiva world are not being exposed to the originals, but the singers are. The singers sort of, are very much have one foot in the yeshiva world, but are also listening to all this other stuff. And I think what it comes down to, honestly, is a lot of these singers are kind of what I would call, again, I don't want to like offend anyone or say anything. I think oftentimes they behave in a way that's more modern Orthodox. Again, without any judgment or anything wrong, but they are taking things from outside their world, and I think oftentimes these people are more exposed to the popular culture than other people in that world. Um, okay. Shmuel says Baskol is a twerk song, one of the most Pritzes styles possible. And then Shmuel also gives the video link of him singing it at a chassan. Yeah, I think I've seen that video as well. Right. I mean, I think that's what's so surprising about this. They're taking a very, I think we can all agree again, that style is not just the style, but like that song, especially if you watch the original music video, which I did not want to show you because I did not think it was appropriate at all. Like it's a very inappropriate song, but yet somehow they've taken it and they made a Jewish song. And I think we can have a reasonable debate then: is that something that's good or not? But I think maybe we can say that you can be matahir even that you can find something spiritually uplifting even that when you turn to a Jewish song. Um, Sylvia says Adam Shemaim is being danced to Rikude. It sounds like Indians rain dance. Okay. Yeah, Ariel says that's from Debbie Friedman. Interesting again. Yeah, Debbie Friedman wrote that music, but it's now being performed and sung by everyone. You see in Orthodox synagogues, for example, all the time. Anyone remember Black Hatitude? I've heard the name. I don't really remember them much. Rivka Fox says Matisyahu. Yeah, Matisyahu. When he started off his career, he was from and he was in that world, but he was adapting reggae, another style that we didn't really talk about, but another new style. Ruth says, we are not the only ones adapting religious messages in our music. Christian rock or Christian country sounds like Mordechai Shapiro. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. Yeah, I think it does. Sarah says, Joe Buchanan is Jewish country Texan. I'm not so familiar with that. But okay. Yonina is adorable and lovely music. Yeah, I agree. Says Susanna, does is Rabbi Bigman or Rabbi Lichtenstein, does he say the same thing about men's singing? In what way? What's exactly the...
It was that thing that, it's okay for women to sing as long as X, Y, Z. So it's like
Yeah.
that could apply to men singing too. So is he
Yeah.
saying that about women, or is he?
I have to look back at the article. I mean, but I think you make a good point. Like you could say that about men singing as well. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Avi says, any comments about Shandy Plotzker? Isn't she one of the ones who's singing like for women? She's one of the from women singing for other women.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's again a new thing. It's just that's a genre that's out there now that didn't exist before. Um, Shlach Rock uses non-Jewish songs. Yeah, I mentioned Shlach Rock at the beginning. Yeah,
Oh, okay. I missed it. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. Okay, and then we have Black Hatted. Yeah, reference to Black Hatted. Yeah, sure. Okay, so we're past 2 o'clock, so feel free to go. I mean, but if anyone wants to stay and we can ask more questions, have more discussion, I'm happy to do that. Sura says Joe Buchanan is a Ger on YouTube and Instagram. Okay, I'll have to check him out. Him I haven't seen.
Too interesting. Nobody's leaving.
Okay, well, but I mean, if yeah, I mean, if we can talk more next time also. But if anyone has anything else they want to ask or say or clarify, I'm happy to stay for a few more minutes.
Great
There's a
class.
group
I
that you
can't
didn't
wait.
mention, but now I can't think of their name. Um, Robbie Solomon was one of them.
Do you mean like Moshav
Yeah, Moshav Band.
or
No,
distant cousins?
no. I have their CDs, but I don't, not in front of me. So it's like,
If anyone wants something amusing, that you can see the evolution of Jewish music with Benny Friedman and Mir Kay, which is a very cute kind of imitating of all the styles of from music from Yasser Rosenblatt to the present. Very cute.
Yeah, I've seen that video. That's a good one. Yeah, people feel free to click on Ariel's link and see that. Diaspora Yeshiva Band. Yeah, I did not mention Diaspora Yeshiva Band. They're like more like also in that they were one of the earlier, I guess, Jewish groups doing the more like rock and roll style, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were the parents of the Solomons from
Right.
Moshav.
Okay. Yeah, right.
Do you think that Bob Dylan's music is Jewish in any way?
Um, see, I will say this. My knowledge of like non-Jewish music is actually not so good. Like I'm not such a big listener to like other stuff. So I don't not so familiar with Dylan. But you tell me, do you think he's Jewish sounding in some way? Any other questions or comments?
I thought that the Billy Joel cover, that was beautiful. I mean, it's such a moving song all by itself. And then to just, weave in a Jewish atmosphere. It's a perfect, it's just perfect. I can't see any objection to that song. It's so moving. It's
Right. I mean, I think also Shalom Lemmer is the type of person who's careful, I think, when he covers songs to take songs that he feels are spiritually appropriate and have the right message. So I think that's very much something he does. Um, Shmuel's okay. My mother says Rabbi Sachs like Leonard Cohen. Yeah, yeah, right. That's another good example. I mean, people are using his tune Hallelujah all the time for like a Charodi and other things. And I mean, if you listen to that song, I mean, the lyrics are kind of, some of them are kind of troubling. Yeah.
His hallelujah also works perfectly with Psalm 150.
Okay, yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and we'll be back again next week. And we're going to talk again about Israeli music and then about synagogue tunes more specifically after that. And then people can also feel free to share some of their own reflections on the class or also any shul tunes they want to share if they know the origins of them or want to ask me about the origins of them. We'll try to figure it out together.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You're
Thanks.
welcome.
Good class again. Great class.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Okay, bye everyone.